Hey there, this is singer-songwriter Lorenzo Walcott, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout Podcast. Are you ready for it? 3, 2, 1, let's go.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of our preview of the Rhode Island Author Expo. In this two-part series, I speak to some of the writers that you can meet at this wonderful event happening on Saturday, December 2nd, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Crowne Plaza Ballroom in Warwick, Rhode Island. This is a free event with more than 100 writers, panels, raffles, and you can learn more at riauthorexpo.com. To kick off this episode, I'm talking with David Shoorens for his book, The Refuge. Now, this one sounds like it has a rip-from-the-headlines feel, but I assure you it is a work of fiction. In this book, the U.S. is a broken country, with a far-right president granted unprecedented power over their political opponents. We talk about the story, how it came to be, and the characters that inhabit it. And joining me now is one of the many writers that you can meet there. We're talking about his debut novel, folks, which I always love doing. Author David Shoorens joins me to talk about Refuge, a novel of lost democracy. And David, normally we're a very non-political show, and now we're nothing but politics. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Always happy to oblige. It is my first novel. And a few minutes before I hooked up with you here on this Zoom call, I was working on my second.
Nice.
But the novel is, if you're going to pigeonhole it into a genre, you could put it as a thriller in general, specifically a military thriller or political thriller. I can call it a political thriller, but one thing I don't do is take people through a particular political party. I don't take them through the halls of Congress, or I don't take them into the Pentagon passageways. I don't take them to the Oval Office. I take a place in this world that is very peaceful and really lovely along the U.S.-Canadian border between Eastport, Maine, small little, picturesque town, and an equally picturesque town in New Brunswick, St. Andrews, just up the St. Croix River, about 11 kilometers from there. And as a fiction writer, I take a very peaceful place filled with ordinary people, and I bring conflict.
So much conflict. Oh, my Lord.
Yes, a good deal of it. Because it just was kind of interesting to try that, just to take the characters who are just really, okay, they're ordinary people, but in extraordinary times. And they're having to deal with a new reality across that border. There are those who are still in the United States. One particular character, his name is Lieutenant Douglas Miles, and he's in the United States Coast Guard, and he's suddenly commanding the small boat, Coast Guard small boat station that actually is in Eastport, Maine, and which is unusual for a full lieutenant to do that. And he gets the whole mission explained to him by the commandant of the Coast Guard. And then he follows through in his orders, and it leads to some interesting situations. And then there's a community of American expats who decided to move away to Canada, or caught up there in all the turmoil, and trying to make a new life for themselves up there in a new community. And inevitably, at least in this fictional world, which I hope doesn't become reality, there is a certain amount of conflict across the border. And there are also Canadian characters that I created. One, Robert Leclerc is his name, and he is an analyst with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, which most Americans would not realize is an actual agency. I've had a lot of fun exploring what they do and their concerns, real concerns that they have today about what's happening on our side of the border. And the Douglas Miles, the Coast Guard lieutenant, I based some of that on my own experience as a junior officer in the Coast Guard. let's see, I hate to think how many decades ago, but it was decades. And so you put all that together, just start writing.
Nice, nice. One thing that I really liked was basically the setting for this book, because it is fiction. This is not, a commentary. This is not a documentary. But oh my God, are we so close to that? The setting of your book, the election, has basically been broken by political violence, the electorate clinging to its glorified past, and a far-right president now has unprecedented power over all political opponents. Basically, it's the fall of democracy. It's kind of the end of it, basically.
It's largely inspired by current events.
Was there any particular events or a time period that really kind of inspired the book? Anything that sort of kicked off this, you know what? I want to write this book.
I wouldn't say it was a single thing. There's the underlying factor that probably is no different for many first-time authors or continuing authors, but especially first time. I'm retired now, and I need to do something. I could have taken all the time and resources that I put into the novel, played a lot of golf, and all I'd be left with is the memory of a badly played game. Instead, I could hold this in my hands, and this is my creation. I did this.
Yeah.
And that is pretty heady stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a desire that this is something I've wanted to do for many years. But then the story kicked in. I thought, oh, I'll just start there. I started writing. Well, will this make any difference? Will this actually turn into something? And it took on a life of its own. And then sadly, we were afflicted by the COVID pandemic. So here I am. Okay, I got a desk, I got a laptop. I can't really do much of anything else. So again, more motivation and opportunity to write. And I had to do all my research basically online. When I was up in Eastport, some authors, they like to go to their place and they set the story and they like to talk to the people up there. Well, if I did that, I'd be breaking some rules about public health. Later on, I presented a copy of the book to the Coast Guardsmen at the station at Eastport. I just barged in and they asked me, well, they said, you didn't want to come up here while you're writing this? I said, if I did that, I'd be more trouble for you guys, because then we were in the middle of COVID and, didn't want to take the chance passing something on to you guys. They're very gracious, by the way, very gracious. I relied on that and some memories of visiting St. Andrews, camping with an RV up there. Wonderful experience. You got to go there. I put all that together, and suddenly I'm typing those last two words, the end. Wow.
That is so satisfying, right? Just be like, okay, we're done.
Yeah. And I get asked often, did I plan out all the chapters? Did I plan out all the little scenes? Hell no. I mean, I had an idea of where I wanted to take it, but of course, you're third way through. That would be good.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll kind of end it like that, and then you're halfway through. No, I don't want to end it like that. I'm going to end it like this. So some things changed. Eventually, I wound up, at those last two words, and then I went through the editing process. Finally, went to a company that's now in Warwick, Stillwater River Publications. They'll be at the Book Expo, by the way. Rather prominent, I think. And they helped me out. Everything they said, they did. They were on time and on target. Then it's all, promotional work is up to me.
Exactly. Which is of course why we're here to talk about the book and talk about the story. So I want to ask a little more about the setting now. In the book's bio, you describe it as a country in chaos, which I think someone might say, "Hey, we're kind of there right now, actually." But how much worse is it in your book?
Much worse. Although there's in the setting of the novel, there's continuing political violence. Yet the characters there, they're not in the thick of it. Think of it this way. How did most of us experience January 6th? On the television. We weren't down there. We just watched it on television, like the rest of the world. That's how these people here, they're kind of out of the way, but certainly are still involved. But they're not for lack of a better metaphor, in the direct line of fire. And so I think that's how most of us live our lives, is that, okay, seek the ordinary, we seek the boring, really. And if we see extraordinary things, they usually tend to be away from us and only come into our living room through television.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how they kind of experience, although they become involved, no matter how hard they try to not be directly involved.
So let's talk about some of the characters. You talked about one already, but I want to ask about the group of expatriates who basically still believe in democracy and kind of want to bring it back. Who are these people, and how can they go about doing that? How can they restore democracy to a country that's kind of lost it?
Well, that is the unanswered question, really. There's no magic waving of a wand at the end. Okay, I guess I'm giving a spoiler here.
No spoilers. No spoilers now.
Yeah, we shouldn't expect that kind of stuff. Like suddenly this apocalyptic vision is not going to be, everything's fine. Just tap the ruby slippers together and you're home. And it doesn't work that way. The people who have found themselves, the Americans in Canada, a variety of different types. The two main characters happen to be retired U.S. Air Force officers. Well retired. They've been retired for some years. And one was an intelligence officer. The other one was a medical officer, a doctor. And they had simply bought a place up in St. Andrews to use as a summer place. And then events happened. They stayed across the border. Others had similar kind of things. They left, but you'll find out what the majority of people do. Leave your job, leave your family. That's tough.
It certainly is. Do you feel like this book is sort of meant to be like a warning to folks? Like, hey, we're kind of going in this direction?
Yeah, you're not the first person to ask me that. I did a podcast with a gentleman in New South Wales, Australia, and he asked me, is this a kind of warning? I suppose in a very minor way. I mean, I did find some inspiration for this with a book written in the 1930s that some people are still familiar with, Upton Sinclair. It Can't Happen Here. And although if you read it today, it has some relevance. Some of the scenes and language may seem archaic in today's world. You bear with that, and it still has a good message. And this is kind of falls in the same kind of path as that. I suppose you could think of it as an update.
Do you feel like the world in your book and the world we have now, are these like right next to each other? Are we kind of like right on the border here?
Could be. I mean, I'd say the needle has moved more toward the troubling times in my novel than moved away from it. There are some moments where you feel like it's working. This week, I served as a poll watcher in my town, but then it looked very well. People were great, very thankful, all that kind of stuff. And then you see in the Providence Journal where only 19% of the eligible voters voted in this special election for the first congressional seat. 19%. That means that 4 out of 5 people are letting 1 out of 5 people decide.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've been doing the poll watching stuff since 2020. And it's like, geez, there's one thing we're asking you, in addition to paying your taxes, which is kind of, has a real penalty for not doing it. But the only thing we're asking you to do is vote.
Yep.
We don't have a military draft. We don't have mandatory service or anything like that. Please vote.
Exactly.
And 19%, I suppose that's to be expected, but it'd be nice if it was a lot more.
Oh, I've got that beat. I've covered some elections as a reporter where we get 10%, 7%. And these are for like local offices that decide everything that happens in your town. Your way of life in that community, these are the folks that make sure it happens. And you're letting, you talk about like 4 to 5 letting the 1/5. You're talking about like you're talking like 9 people basically letting one decide. Yeah. That's even worse. That's so much worse, actually.
Well, it's like the banner over the Washington Post is "Democracy dies in darkness."
Mm.
Well, democracy can also die from apathy.
Yep.
Whatever you vote for, whoever you vote for, please try to vote.
Yeah, get involved. I also want to ask, we were talking characters, I want to ask about those who serve this new government. How do their own morals and ethics suffer because of that, or how they kind of cope with that?
The major character involved in that is the character in the Coast Guard, Lieutenant Douglas Miles. Mm-hmm. By the way, his last name comes from a former commanding officer of mine, but a good man. And anyway, he's a serving officer. He's supposed to be just apolitical. That's it. I don't talk about this. My mission is first and last, and that's it. I look to my command. I don't go any further. And he finds himself basically with a very unusual mission at that station. Normally, it's a senior chief that is an enlisted man, E7 chief, E8 senior chief, who is commanding such a station. But now there's a full lieutenant, no 3 who's there. Why? It has to be explained to him. Why am I going to this? I was an up-and-coming guy, and now I'm here. So after it's explained to him, and he can sort of contain his resentment of being sidetracked this way, he follows through in the mission, and he finds himself also billeted with a new federal law enforcement agency run by a unit run by a guy at Eastport by the name of Williams, Homeland Security Special Unit to watch the border, and maybe some other things. So there's a lot of tension between the two, ends in an interesting fashion. But, Douglas Miles, I get some of the search and rescue incidents that happen in this fictional world based on my own experience. And also he is kind of a collage of different types I remember from Coast Guard days. One man in particular that I knew, I was friends with, and you'd look at him and go, he may be an ensign, but he's going to be an admiral someday. You just knew. And I wasn't the only one who thought that way about it. I kind of used some of his spirit, let's say, to put into that character. And others were just ordinary people, except for one man that is referred to as I introduce him, as the old man. And I'll leave it at that because I want the readers to discover who the old man is, an American living in Eastport.
Well, folks, there is certainly a lot to discover in this book, and you can find everything you want at refugedavidshoorens.com. Link will be in the description. But before we go, you mentioned this earlier. You have a second book in the works. What can we expect from that?
Yeah. That is turning out to be it's another thriller. It's developing into more of a psychological thriller. A man who finds himself the subject of a great deal of harassment will wake up on the first page, the first line, and suddenly discovered he's bound and gagged and kidnapped. And then I'll just go back in time.
That's a great opening. I like that. So
I'm hoping it'll be nice. I'm 72,000 words into it, so
it's an investment.
I like that. Finish it.
Exactly. Yeah. This far in, you may as well finish it. Well,
I'm going to finish it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, David, it's been great talking to you. Certainly looking forward to meeting you at the expo. What are you most looking?
We'll see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. What are you looking forward to?
Oh, at the expo?
Yeah.
I have a good deal of fun just talking to people who are looking for books. I'm curious about what they're looking for. I have a good deal of fun talking to other authors, their experience in a sort of a way I do with them and they do with me what we're doing right now. How'd you do this? And why? all that kind of stuff.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'm sure you'll get plenty of chances to do that in just a few weeks. Again, folks, December 2nd, Crown Plaza Ballroom in Warwick, Rhode Island, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m.
They can't make it, you can get it on Amazon.
There you go.
So,
All right, Dave. Thanks again, and I look forward to meeting you in person.
all right, looking forward to it, Max.
To close out this series, I'm talking with Thomas Brillat with his first book, Ekaternia. The main character is actually a relative of Tom's, and he talks about how he learned of her story and turning these family tales into a completed novel. He goes into the more memorable stories and writing what amounts to a practice book before writing this one. I am talking to author Thomas Brillat for his very new book, which sounds really interesting, Ekaternia. This story is entirely true. This is not a work of fiction. It's based on a very, very true story. So, Thomas, first off, thank you for joining me. It's great to have you here. Who is this person, and what about their story made you think, you know what, this is a book?
So, okay, quick clarification. It is a novel.
Yep.
So, but it is overwhelmingly, it's 80-20, 80 fact, 20% fiction. I didn't know enough to make it a biography. It's essentially the story of the life of my grandfather's second wife. My biological grandmother passed away when my father was in high school. I never knew her. So this is the woman I knew growing up. And as I got older, and particularly after I became an adult, she shared stories of her life with me. Of course, I only had one side, never heard the other side of the story, so I only had her take on her life, plus just a ton of research to help verify what I used to write the book.
And how did you do the research? Because this is not like a major historical figure. So how did you kind of fill in the blanks?
I was lucky. I mean, a lot of it is a generic story. That's why I like it. It's an immigrant story. It's historic issues. There were large movements of people from Western Russia to China and Siberia in the latter part of the 19th century and early 20th. She was part of that. There was the Japanese invasion. You can research that into China. There's information there and the interactions between them and the Russians, many white Russians, which she was, the non-Soviets, non-communist Russians that were expelled, how they moved within China, and then what happened with World War II. And then her stories really took over after that. Plus, and then a number of them, likewise, she had civil rights issues later on. She was a Russian living in the South of the United States in the 1940s and 50s. So there was involvement, J. Edgar Hoover and his crew investigating every Russian, of course, every Russian was a communist. There were periods of time where she had a normal life, but overwhelmingly it was filled with all kinds of wild adventures.
Yeah, I read some of those adventures on your site when you described who she was, and oh my God, Tom, I feel like if you were to pitch this book to someone, you'd have to punctuate every so often by saying, I am not making this up.
Just incredible, just incredible stories. She never lost her accent, 50 plus years in the States, never lost her accent. Fun to listen to. You'd go see her, and there was always the samovar tea service. She would lay it out and do it soup to nuts, do it the right way. Fascinating woman.
Yeah, she sounds it. Any particular stories of her that really stuck with you?
Two in particular. She witnessed the death of her best friend, which was remarkably tragic, in the Philippines during the bombings in World War II. And then at that same time frame, during that same period, there's so many, but I'm picking these two just off the top of my head. She spent most of the war years, 4 years, living in a hole in the ground in the mountains in the Philippines because she was not, the Russians were not particularly welcome. Certainly she was hiding from the Japanese. And these people in the mountains sheltered her in a hole in the ground.
Jeez. And like you said, she made her way from Russia to China to the Philippines and eventually the States. I'm curious
Right.
as to why she took that path.
Yeah, well, yes. My grandfather was an Army officer on MacArthur's staff. He's one of the characters in the book. At the end of the war, he was working in Manila as a part of the force that was overseeing one of the POW camps for Japanese soldiers. And my grandfather knew 4 languages. This is a funny story, typical military story. He grew up, household language was German, bread and milk language was Polish, the government go to school bureaucratic language was Russian. He was born in Bialystok, Poland. So he knew 3 first languages growing up. And then he came to the States and learned English. So when the wartime came as an immigrant, he felt it was his obligation to join the service. And of course, typical military story, knowing German, Russian, and Polish, they send him to Asia. Of course. Why not?
Does that make sense in some way? Because it doesn't make sense to me.
No, of course it doesn't make any
Of
sense.
course not. Okay, fantastic.
But, she was singing and working in these clubs at the end of the war. He was there at the end of the war. He knew Russian, and they hit it off.
Oh my God, that's so amazing, so amazing. How was your family about this? Were they really supportive, of the idea of sharing her story?
So my father's still alive in his mid-90s, and I have to remind him that it is a novel. There's enough where I had to fill in the gaps. That's why I didn't make it a biography. He took it really well. He really liked the book. He really liked it.
Cool.
So
cool.
I felt good about that.
Yeah. All right.
But there is a funny story because I've been waiting for years. He had a box of letters and correspondence that she had received from the last love of her life. And in the book, Peter in the book, all in Russian. And I have photographs and everything with the Russian scripts on the back that I said, Dad, I'm working on this book. I could use this. And I never got it until after the book was published. So I'm trying to fill in some gaps of just from my own personal knowledge, trying to get some of that translated. But so I wrote the book without that stuff.
Well, sequel book, spin-off book, companion book. There's a lot of options here. There's some options here.
Friends have suggested that. We'll see.
What is your take on her as a person?
I can't say honestly that I ever really knew her. I had to make my assessments on what I wrote in the book and how I described her based on a young boy's and a teenager's and an adult's perception of what she was giving to me, what she was putting out there, how she came across. Extraordinarily stylish woman. I mean, the cover of my book was astounding. When the artist sent this back, I had 6 different things to choose from, and they never saw the photo that I have, which I'll probably bring with me on December 2nd. She never saw that, but I said, oh my goodness. As soon as I saw that cover, I said, ooh, that's her. Stylish, elegant, proud. She was a proud Russian native, independent Russian, proud. And she loved America. She loved the States. She became a U.S. citizen. But boy, oh boy, her heart was back home in Russia. And it just always, always was.
Now, did she ever go back to Russia?
No.
Wow. Why
Never
not?
went back.
Why not?
She became older and it was communist.
Yeah.
She died before, right at the end. Well, she was older by then. Definitely into her 70s by the time in the early 90s when things changed over there. So no, she never went back.
Oh, wow.
She wasn't much of a traveler. If she had been, I think she would have gone with Peter, whose real name was Boris, off to Hawaii, but she didn't do that.
You say not much of a traveler, but she has lived on four different countries.
Yes,
so
that's true. Yeah, that was done kind of by necessity. Right?
Fair enough. Yeah,
life's necessity. It offers her that she had to go, no choice.
Yeah. What got you into writing in the first place? Because I think we mentioned this is your first book.
It's certainly the first novel I've published. I've been writing for quite a while, all kinds of different things for a long time. Certainly when I have some academic stuff that's out there, that's a whole different kind of writing. But I was a Rhode Island Foundation Fellow in 1999 and 2000. and I was the executive director of a nonprofit organization that dealt with adult literacy. And everybody had stories, but they didn't know how to share them. So I wanted to learn about storytelling. As I got involved with storytelling, many of my storytelling colleagues had all these little books out there and learned to be a story. And I said, that's fascinating. And I began to write stories and do oral storytelling and tell oral stories. And some of my friends said, wow, some of these stories would make a good book. I got more serious. I joined, a writing group at the South Kingstown Neighborhood Guild. I've been writing weekly little vignettes for a long time. And when my friends said, you need to write this particular story as a book, when I finally stopped working full time, I just sat down and said, well, I need to see if I can write a book first. And one of the things I was working on today, I have a novel that I already wrote that's finished. It's all done, to see if I could actually write a novel. But so I said, oh, wow, I could and I can. But this was the story that I wanted to share, this particular one about Ekaternia. And so my emotional involvement with that was a little bit different. And so when it was finished and I had, my beta group, my friends and others take a look at it, they said, yo, you got to publish this thing. Writing is not a career that I aspired to when I was younger. So I looked at all the different options. And I had a great time working with, Steve and Dawn Porter. So that was the route I took with them at their shop. So and now I got the second one. So I think, I'll see him in December. I may do another one. And I got a third one, 70 pages into a third one using similar characters. With this other story I wrote, I think it could make a good little series. So we'll see what happens.
I love that you wrote a book to see if you could write another book, basically. Like you wrote a book more or less as practice to see if you could actually do one like for realsies. I love this.
That's what I did. It's I have it. It's on my website. It's there. It's works in progress.
I get you. Tell me about the other book though, the one that you're 70 pages into.
Okay. So this third one, in 1962, there was a successful escape of 3 people from Alcatraz prison. Then in the 1971, there was D.B. Cooper, who bailed out of the airplane over Washington State. And then in the 1980s, there was this man named Claude Dallas, who was a mountain man who shot and killed a couple of people out in Idaho. So I'm going to connect all those 3 with the characters, which is with a river rafting crew, which is in this other book that is all done already. So that's the plan. We'll see where it goes. I never know where I'm. When I started writing, even the weekly 1 and 2 page things I write, I never know how it's going to end. Sorry, I knew how Ekaterina was going to end. So
Yeah,
I didn't know.
but
Most of the things I write, I don't know how they're going to end.
yeah. And this other book you're working on sounds really interesting. Do you have like a preference for these kind of like real life thriller stories?
I was a historian in school.
Mm.
I worked for years at Mystic Seaport. I still volunteer down there once a week, talking about maritime history. So I like the history aspect. I've enjoyed reading, historical fiction and other things. But I read adventure novels. I read all, lots of other types of things, military things. I was in the Navy, but I was looking for some unique way to work on a third book. And I said, I have these characters who are river rafting, and I can have them do river rafting in different places of the world. I didn't introduce them well enough. I brought in kind of someone who could become the main character of a series. I'm undecided about that in this novel that I wrote before Ekaterina. But I want to use him and this river rafting crew, and I've already thought through potential plots and river rafting, down in the Amazon and out in Asia, in the Himalayas and wherever. So I got these ideas. I just not sure how long I'm going to live and how much writing I'll get done.
I love that is like your motivation. I could die any day now, so let's get this stuff done. I like that. All right, Tom. So, of course, the expo is just a couple weeks away. What are you looking forward to about it?
Well, being a first timer, I'm not sure what to expect. I had several friends who've done it, some who liked the idea and return annually, others who said, yeah, they tried it, wasn't for them, and so on. I said, well, I'm a rookie. I know it's a good story. I've had enough people read it now all over the country who've told me it's a good book. So I just want to get it out there, just experience the event myself, which I haven't done. I know I'll be behind the table most of the time. Be that as it may, I think I'll get the idea. I'm just hoping a few more people will see it. Maybe somebody might like it and want to take a look at it and read it. And I have no preconceived notions about what to expect.
Well, I imagine it will still be a great time. And one more time, folks, before we go, this is happening on Saturday, December 2nd, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., Crown Plaza Ballroom in Warwick, Rhode Island. You go to riauthorexpo.com for more information. And to learn about this great writer, you go to Tom Brillat, BRILLAT.com. Everything's there. And Tom, thank you again, and looking forward to meeting you in person at the expo.
Well, Max, I thank you for the opportunity to share this time with you. I appreciate it very much.
Hey, this is singer-songwriter Danny Horovitz, and you're listening to Citywide Blackout.
All right, folks, that brings this series to a close. I hope you enjoyed the interviews, and I hope to see you at the upcoming Rhode Island Author Expo. Go to riauthorexpo.com for all the information, and keep on reading.